Hi, welcome to this virtual presentation. I'm Andrew Oliver, Creative Director here at Panavox. We're working on a new type of technology that's bringing out lots of interesting lessons, and I'd agreed with your lecturers that I would give a presentation on some of our findings and discoveries, as we believe that they're important for future game developers and writers and creators. Unfortunately, we couldn't work out a time and a date where everyone could make, so I've agreed that I'll video the full presentation and give it to you. It's pretty much the same as it was all going to be on virtual Zoom. Anyway, the only difference is that when we get to the questions at the end, it's a little bit difficult to do. Although, ironically, our technology would allow for that in the future. But in the meantime, you'll have to put up with the old linear technology, whereas we're all going interactive. So, welcome to the presentation. This is lessons learned from creating conversational dramas. Now, obviously, this is a new technology, and I'll be talking about what we've learned whilst creating experiences within our own app, RichCast. So I'll be explaining what RichCast is as well. First off, I'll start with a little teaser trailer that was on our website, just to sort of, it was supposed to entice people into sort of what we are working on.
Why do we love stories? Is it losing ourselves in another world? Hearing a voice that has something to say? Or is it because of our own reaction to what we hear?
If there's no one around, let's take a closer look.
Imagine a story that responds to your reaction, to your decisions, to you. Imagine adventures, mysteries, thrillers that you can speak to, that you can play just by talking.
Let's go to the body in the bedroom.
Imagine audio games, quizzes, stories, learning, all powered by conversation, which anyone can create, whether professionally or for fun. And publish to the world to hear their reaction. This is a whole new kind of entertainment.
What bridge is this?
That is Tower Bridge.
This is RichCast.
That we are creating a tool and a platform and an engine that creates a new type of experience, an interactive experience. We want to make something that's really, really easy for anyone to be able to make. Currently, it's quite easy to make a podcast or a YouTube video, and there's platforms you can easily upload them. As soon as you go interactive, it becomes more difficult. You need to become more of a developer. You need to have a little dev team. You need to sign up to Apple and Google and publish on the App Store. And that is difficult and expensive. And what we want to do is put the power back in the hands of the creatives so that anyone can create new interactive experiences with lots of new fun-packed features, as it says. So it's all about getting better tools. Myself and my brother have been making games for best part of 4 decades, I believe. Started in the early 80s and we're creating games by the mid 80s. When we first started on the humble Spectrum and Commodore 64 and Amstrad, people around us were creating games like Space Invaders and Pac-Man, and graphics were created on graph paper and worked out as sort of typing in data. Our first thing that we wrote whilst we were still at school was an art package so that we could make the art. We then realized we needed to make a sprite package. These were all things we released. We made a sprite package for animated characters, as we realized that this was important, to animate these characters moving around, and we started to make games. We then realized we have to have a consistent engine, which we later made cross-platform so that we could publish a game on one platform, but then get it out on all the different computers, which has various implications, especially on those early computers. And then we realized we needed a map editor so that then we could create worlds for these character sprites, animated sprites, to move around in. And we created the sort of famous Dizzy series and many simulators and all sorts of other games. But it was down to having the right tools to make the games fast, efficiently, so that we could iterate. We went on to set up Blitz Games, where we did the same. We created our own engine, our own tools, and we're able to create a lot of games throughout those years. Sadly, we were hit by the sort of stock market crash of 2008, when all the publishers stopped commissioning projects. Our last two big projects were Epic Mickey 2 for Disney Interactive and Puss in Boots for the movie from DreamWorks Interactive. Both of those divisions of those companies folded, and like you don't see many games of animated movies anymore, which is a shame. Anyway, subsequently we've set up a few companies and moved around a little bit, and this is our latest venture that we've set up with a good friend, Neil Campbell, who's our development director. And Panafox was set up to create a new type of entertainment. Very often narrative-led entertainment, but not necessarily. So I'll have to try and show you what kind of projects we could do with this. First off, our USP is that we want to use voices as the input. I did a talk at Develop recently all about the evolution of interfaces. And each new interface allows a new genre of game. So if you have a microphone, you can do karaoke. We had great success when they brought out the wand, as it had families who were like bowling and playing tennis, and all sorts of new games became very accessible. You could argue that you could have played tennis before on a controller pressing buttons, but it was nothing like actually swinging your arm properly. And we think that the best interface that is available now to all of us is voices. People have got used to the fact they can talk to their phones, and the phones understand. The problem is that people just ask it to set an alarm or set the weather. So it's about making something creative where there is a conversation to be had with artificial characters. So that's what we set out to do with RichCast, and we've taken it further. People have got used to the fact they can talk to their phones, and the phones understand. The problem is that people just ask it to set an alarm or set the weather. So it's about making something creative where there is a conversation to be had with artificial characters. So that's what we set out to do with RichCast, and we've taken it further. As we are creating a little bit of a new entertainment, we thought we'd start our sort of experimental project with Sherlock Holmes, where you are Sherlock Holmes, and the idea is that you have to solve the mystery by talking to characters and exploring the scenes that are put in front of you. It's kind of like the old branching narrative stories, only those are often text-based, or at best voiced in one direction with maybe button choices or multi-choice, whereas here you hold conversation. And we thought people know Sherlock Holmes has multiple objectives to solve the murder. The idea being is that we were going to make a tool set to allow an author to write the whole story on his own, and then once he's finished and got it all working, then we an artist came in and put some visuals on. He's an illustrator, so it was all 2D, but we have an animatic engine that allowed him to do some animations, and we put on an audio designer to put in some ambience onto the scenes. This is just a start. We've learned a lot of lessons from creating this, but I'll show you a little 3-minute video of how it plays out.
Sherlock Holmes and the Eminent Explorer. I remember it was bitterly cold that morning in 1896. An icy fog blanketed the city, while freezing rain swiftly soaked the clothes of any of those foolhardy enough to venture out. I burst into the cozy sitting room of 221B Baker Street to find Mr. Sherlock Holmes hard at work on one of his experiments. Holmes, Sir William Blanchard, has died, and it looks like a murder.
Oh no, who's that?
He was one of the Empire's greatest adventurers, traveling the world, discovering lost empires, and finding priceless artifacts. Shall we attend right away?
Absolutely, yes, let's go.
Good, I'll get my hat. We were soon in a growler, the horses pulling us swiftly through the London bustle, towards Sir William Blanchard's abode. Sir William Blanchard's house was as impressive as the man himself.
Dr. Watson, Mr. Holmes, thank you for coming over. It's a very perplexing case. The victim is still in his bedroom, so you might want to start there. The valet is in the drawing room, awaiting your questioning. Then there's the garden, which we've not disturbed, as per your requirements.
Where should we go, Holmes?
Let's go up to the bedroom and see the body.
A sorry sight, isn't it, gentlemen? I'll give you the lay of the land, and then you can inspect the scene. Sir William lays there, as we found him. He was stone cold when we arrived.
Where would you like to start?
Let's start by looking at the body.
Let me turn my medical eye on the man for you, Holmes. Sir William's face is a terrible mask of agony. His clothing is in disarray. His hands appear clenched and tight. What shall we take a closer look at?
Can we have a look at his hands?
Let me see if I can open them. His palms are covered in a red rash, as if he had pressed them to something hot. I saw a chemist's shop at the top of the street. Perhaps they could shed some light on the matter. Would you like to look at anything else on the body?
Can we have a look at his face?
It's a terrible sight, Holmes. Testament to the agony of his death throes. So sad. If I open his jaw... Odd. He has a pearl in his mouth. Why would someone have pearls in their mouth? Perhaps some folk medicine, of which I am unaware. Perhaps the chemist would know more about this. Would you like to look at anything else on the body?
Can we go to the chemist?
Good morning, gentlemen. How may I assist you?
Do you know anything about a red rash on a person's hand?
A reddening of the palm could be caused by any number of irritants: heat, acid, alkali, chemicals. How may I help further?
He had pearls in his mouth.
Ingesting pearls, that's certainly an odd thing to do, but not unheard of. It used to be a remedy for poisons, but that would have involved grinding up the pearl into a powder and ingesting that. I doubt that whole pearls would have the same effect, if it had any effect at all. Any other queries?
No, I think I'll go and talk to the valet.
So that showed roughly how it plays out. Now we've learned lots of lessons from that. Obviously, you've heard the artificial voices. We can change to normal voices, like we can record actors, and it would come across more dramatic. But at the moment, we want to sort of leave it to show where the state of art is of artificial characters, but also because authors need to be able to have those voices in there to be able to author and iterate. That's very important. Let's see the lessons that we've learned whilst creating this story. So first off, when you make a story, you've got to think about who your audience is. In this case, we think that the kind of people who will play these experiences would be, well, typically people like yourselves. Probably the mid teenagers up to 30-year-olds. But it really depends on the type of story, because anyone has a mobile phone. So therefore, how do you attract them and make it obvious? We're kind of going for experiences that last 20 to 30 minutes. We think that's the sort of reasonable attention span. It is a story, so you have to have some sort of depth. But if you make something too long, then people feel too committed to it. We imagine that over time, we'll be breaking things up to chapters and episodes, and we will probably have longer stories. Think about what is a compelling story that has a reasonable amount of intrigue and suspense, but allows people to think that there's something that's going to be fun that they would like to enjoy. Now, we did pick Sherlock Holmes because we thought it's obvious, being interactive, you have objectives that you will have to solve. But we wanted the story to sort of play out, you being Sherlock Holmes, play out a full story over the half an hour and see if you can solve the murder. Yes, so as I say, Sherlock Holmes, it was obvious, that is you. That's because one of the things is, in a normal story, when you are watching a film or a TV program, it can all be explained to you, and you don't need to think for yourself because you're just an observer. Whereas now you are, in our case, Sherlock Holmes. But what is the person, when the person's playing, what is their backstory and their motivation? What are they expected to do if it's a story that is going to unfold in front of them? They might not know. There's a thing they do in Hollywood quite often. It's a sort of technique. I like to call it a sort of who's your friend, where we would have, in this case, an NPC talk to another NPC that's obviously with you and say sort of, hey, who's your friend? That person will then be describing your traits. And this is, it's done quite a lot in movies. You once you sort of hear about it, you will spot it. It's a very quick and natural way to find the depth of the character that is the main star. In this case, it's you, and you need to do that. Setting the scene. So it's typical that in normal branching narrative stories, you have large descriptive texts all about the location to try and bed the person into where they are. Apart from the fact that you have visuals, it's just a bit old school, and it's a bit staid. We are an interactive platform, so you want to give as minimal amount of kind of extra detail as possible to allow the character to be talking about things. So you put a small piece in, knowing that because it's interactive, you'll come back round in loops, and so you'll come back to this area, or you can embellish certain scenes and areas. So what's the outcome of a story? So we had the murder for Sherlock Holmes, but you've got to think in your story, what is the end goal that you want the player to achieve by the end of it? Now, again, in a film, it's just get to the end, just watch it, and just make sure that they have fun whilst watching it. Here, you've got to think that they want to achieve something. It's like a game. There should be a goal. Do you want to make the goal a bit of a mystery? Do you want to have a twist at the end? But somebody wants to set out knowing roughly where they're going with this. Set that player expectation. It's quite important. What we found is, and this is the same as any video game, is set lots of objectives, mini objectives, so that every few minutes they are achieving something and knowing that it's a positive thing. In a video game, it's really obvious and really shallow. Supposing it's something like a Call of Duty or something, every time you shoot one of the bad guys, you get a little dopamine hit and you think, yes, I'm getting there. If you're playing a racing game, you overtake somebody, you know that you're doing better by doing this. In a story, it's more difficult to get those little tiny positive goals and objectives, but it is very important. Otherwise, you can play not feeling that you're moving things forward correctly. What we want to do, and what we've noticed it happens in some other experiences that we've been playing, is we want people to experience a full story. We're saying sort of 20 minutes, half an hour. That may change. But the point is that we do want them to experience a whole story. And there's many interactive stories whereby you take the wrong corner and you get mugged, or you get shot, or you get killed, or you get caught, and game over, and it's annoying. Now, we used to have that in video games, but that was okay to a certain extent when it was arcade machines and they came from that, and it was a case of how far can you get, or like you will be sort of stopped early. But once you go to stories, you kind of want to know what the end of the story is, and it's kind of frustrating. Imagine if you were watching films, but it was 50-50 whether you would actually get to the end of the film. You would probably not want to watch films quite so much if you thought you were quite often never going to find out what the end was. If you beat a video game, you feel really happy, and it's a sort of closure, and you will talk to your friends about what a cool game because you completed it. It was a challenge and you made it. But if you had a game whereby it got too hard and you were stopped and you gave up, your last memories are of just massive frustration, and you're just not happy that you weren't able to fulfill it. You might be thinking, oh, maybe I'll come back to it in a few days, and you never do, and it wanes off. So what we want to do is try to create these experiences where they are interactive, but they are full stories, and we think that's very important. We think that's where some people do miss it in interactive narratives, branching narrative stories that we've played. So, yeah, leave people with a sense of accomplishment. So, another thing that we've seen, and that is that it's very common to have a narrator try to describe a scene to you, but that does take you out of the immersion. Stories and films and video games, they're all about creating a level of immersion. And by having artificial characters that talk to you, and they will be going 3D and things in the future, will give an incredible level of immersion because you can just chat to them. But if you keep on having a narrator trying to explain things to you, it just breaks that immersion. We cheated in Sherlock because he's got a companion, Watson, and so Watson can keep filling you in on things. So if it knows that you really ought to by this time have worked out a certain thing, Watson might sort of just interject after a certain time has elapsed and say, oh, Sherlock, have you thought of checking that? Or why don't we go and talk to the butler? It's a really useful tool to have. Whereas otherwise, a person could just be left hanging, a little bit lost, but there's no way as an author you can help that person who is lost. You can put in timers to know that they should have got further than they have at this point, but how do you now inform them? So, our gameplay is making choices. That's the gameplay of any video game, whether you're pressing buttons or waving your hands or doing things with wands. It's all about what choices is the player making, and you have to make sure that they feel that those choices are reasonable choices. So first off, this is all about natural language speaking to characters. So you have to set up a choice by posing a question, but a question shouldn't be feeling like it's very closed. Which door do you want to go through, the left or the right? I mean, that is not the kind of way that we talk, and it feels very binary, and the player will just sort of like, I don't know, left. But so you need it to sound like a conversation, but at the end of it, know that it was a question with a reasonable way of the player speaking, which is going to have a choice that is captured. So it needs to be meaningful choice. The left and right door, I mean, I don't know. It's like what's behind each door. Supposing it was a Dungeons and Dragons and you're down a corridor, dungeons either side, and you are exploring the dungeons, and the left door you can hear scratching at the door, and there's obviously a monster that's going to sort of like grab you and devour you maybe behind the left door, but the right door is swinging slightly open. Now you might think, oh, well, it's obviously go through the right door, but if the quest is that you have to find a treasure that's been closely guarded, then clearly the left door would be the better door to choose. The problem is you may not be equipped. If you just walk into that left door, you may be savaged. Hopefully not killed, because you're not supposed to end things early, but possibly injured and put back a bit. But supposing you had previously picked up a sword and now you go up there. Now the right choice now would be to go in the left door, because you know that the monster behind that door you can kill with your sword and the treasure will be in that room. So it's the same place, but now with a different reason why you will make different choices. But you also want to make sure that you lace in lots of positive and negative reinforcement. I talked about shooting games and racing games. It's really obvious when you've made a positive or negative advancement. But in speech and stories, it's a little bit different. But what you need to do is know that the situation, it was obvious in some way that what they did was fairly good or fairly bad. Now, fairly good, you can congratulate people, and it's possibly a person that's going to sort of say, hey, great, fantastic, and be talking in a very positive mood, and that will make it good. Negative, you want to make out that something's gone not as good as it could, but that it's not end of the road, and it's not anything that will now hold them back going further. They don't want to feel that they've made a bad choice and now going forward they're kind of being like crippled or held back because of a choice that they made earlier on. So what we've found from the many experiences that are being created behind closed doors is that authors keep making these games too hard. They know the stories in their head and they know what the outcomes are. This always happens with sort of puzzle based games, and we used to have it with our Dizzy games, and that was in the days when it was kind of fire and forget. We'd try and come up with these puzzles that we thought this is completely logical, and when we published the games, people would be printing maps and the solutions into the magazines, which actually was quite good because it got sort of lots of advertising for those games. But we honestly thought that we were making them quite easy. And the problem is we knew the answers when we were writing it. The other people don't. And you have to make sure that people are informed enough to make the good choices and that they are relatively easy. And you want to just make a lot of choices. But then you've got to think about, it's great if they get the answers, but what if they don't? There's always got to be, as an author, work out what happens if the person doesn't work it out. And we can put in, as I said, timers or little tricks that come in to help a player who appears to be stuck. So our input is natural language. So let's talk a little bit about the voice input. We're calling it voice first. The interesting thing is, as I may have alluded to earlier, you are capturing a choice and going down different branches. So there are it is like a multi-choice, and people have said, but what if you're playing on a bus or a train and you don't want to talk and you don't want the volume up and things like that? So we have got subtitles and we have even got buttons. These are available for the author to choose whether they want to put them on or not on particular things, and then it's up to the player if they want to turn them on. We thought it's a feature that we can put on. Let's let the creative authors work out if that's good or bad for their project. We personally would like people to immerse themselves with these virtual characters and just talk to them. That is our kind of USP, and it's fun. And as we go with more realistic graphics, it will feel way more natural. So problem is, you'll find that players do interpret things differently. As an author, you know in your head what the scenario is, and therefore you know what to expect the player to be imagining. And in a regular linear medium like a film, this works fine because the narrative will take them along the journey, even if they have a slightly different interpretation. But a player in RichCast needs to keep making decisions, and it's based on their understanding of a scenario. So it's really important to make sure that you have given them enough information to make that choice. You will be very surprised by what you took for granted that was missed. But given how easy it is to iterate, then it's a case of playing it with your friends and watching them see if they can talk to your characters and how they respond and if it works. And then, if not, change it. Change the question slightly. Change how you framed things to make it more obvious. We have found that there are different words that people use, but they have the same meanings. We all know about sort of, we British call it rubbish, but Americans call it trash. We go into a hotel lobby and look for the lift, whereas an American would look for an elevator. There are certain words which can cause confusion. You've got to watch out for that. And it's really important to avoid ambiguity. And that seems kind of obvious, but it's very important. So quite often it's to do with context. So in our Sherlock Holmes, we had Lieutenant Lestrade meet you at the entrance of the house. He told you that there was a few things around and then said, where do you want to go? It felt like an open question, but in the context of a house, there's certain rooms you can look for. So obviously he was trying to lead you to the dining room to talk to the butler, or you could have gone to the bedroom to see the body. But you could have asked for the kitchen. You could ask for the hallway. There are different things you can, and it will respond differently. But you know that you can capture those things because the player is only going to ever say the rooms of a house. You will make sure those rooms of a house sound different. But as you move out to different locations, if it was areas of a castle or something, and you ask where do you want to go, people might not know what the different parts. It could be called the ramparts or the top of the wall. I don't know. But they've got to make it obvious. Names of characters. I've watched movies before where I get confused with some of the different characters. They're sort of, I don't know, a 30-year-old blonde lady, and there's two quite similar, and you're kind of watching it going, oh, which one was it? That sort of doesn't matter in a linear medium. You just watch it and it doesn't matter if you're a bit vague on who some of the characters are or what their names were. But it's really important in this when you actually have to talk to someone and you might have to talk to them by name. So you've got to make sure that names are very memorable and the characters are very memorable. And then it is voice recognition. So you've got to make sure that they even sound different. So an example, you might have two characters in a room called Thomas and Dominic, and you're thinking that's fine. Those characters are completely different, but it's natural language speaking. And what you want to do is make sure that if people are a bit casual and they say, hey, Tom, that it works. The problem is it doesn't work if they say, hey, Dom, because now you've got Tom and Dom. And voice recognition is going to fall over. It is not going to know who you spoke to. And it's not because our voice recognition is not good. It's as good as your kind of Siri and Alexa and things. The problem is even humans over a crowded room might mishear Tom and Dom. And you'll put their name into a sentence and it's awkward. So make characters very different and make them sound different, make locations very different. So avoid repetition. Sorry if I've repeated myself a bit on this, but there's very often in branching narrative stories that we've experienced is you come back to same locations and you don't want to, or you come back to the same character, for example. You don't want them to say the same thing. We've all played way too many video games that do exactly that. So we've got systems in there for sort of like knowing that you've got counters on, like if you've met this character before, so therefore when you talk to them again, they will give you a little bit more information, not the same information. They can embellish things. They can, like, I don't have much more to say about the situation, but I can say it in a different way. And it's up to the author to just create those narratives and think, what would happen in a real situation if you went back to the same person? What would they say? And it's very easy to just put it in a script and it will be voiced out. One of the reasons we don't sort of want people to jump in and put full voices in right near the beginning is because it's too difficult to iterate. And they go, oh, I've got this voice recorded, I'll just use that again and again and again. And that's what happens. So it's poor. You don't need to always describe a scene or have even a character tell you about important things in the scene, because you can set the mood with audio, so you can make something feel spooky and oppressive, but you can also do that with visuals. Now, there is an interesting thing here in the fact that we're doing it on a smartphone with the idea that you have a screen, and so you can put visuals in which help your story. But you might, as an author, want your whole story to play out without looking at the screen, so that you could be walking your dog or something and be playing the entire game without looking at the screen. And what we're doing now going forward is we're giving the options to the authors, but the players, whether they want to look at the screen or not look at the screen. And if they don't look at the screen, then it will give a description of the room, but if they are looking at the screen, they can see the visuals. It's just an interesting thing that we've discovered. Iteration, I have talked lots about. Help systems, there's going to be all these mini objectives, and you can lace in counters to look for how long something takes to do. And if they haven't done what they really need to do, then have some way that you can help them. A character walks in, a phone rings, or something, a light flickers through the curtains and shines onto the table to show something that's important that they haven't noticed. It's really important to help the player from getting stuck. Keep your projects clean and organized. We've tried to make as simple a system as possible, and I'll show you in a minute, but these projects grow quite quickly, and when you've got multiple characters in multiple scenes with multiple objectives and with counters and little bits of logic going on, things can get confusing if you are not very well structured and organized. We've added some features to help you do this, junctions and pages, to make it clean. The other thing to keep clean is your language. I mean, this should be sort of, generally, most stories should be sort of open, non-offensive, suitable for all. Although we're not targeting children at the moment, simply because GDPR and all sorts of issues with online entertainment for kids. So we're just avoiding it at the moment. These things will come in the future. And ultimately, we'd like you to learn from others. So when you sort of download and have a look at this, there are tutorials and videos and help, and you can play some of the other games to see what works and what doesn't work. And sort of, I'm sure you'll think, I could have done better than that. And that's exactly what we want people to do, is thinking, well, that's a really cool story, but I think I could do better, or I've got a burning desire to do a certain story, and these are the tools that will enable it. So the tools. This is what it looks like, available on the PC and the Mac at the moment. You create these colorful looking flowcharts with tiles. You join the tiles together in a sort of flow, and you have all of these action tiles which you would sort of pull down, pop onto your virtual desktop, they ping open, and you will fill them in with different details. So that's the action bar across the top, and then you've got your standard toolbar down the side, left hand side, cut, paste, copy, undo. We've got some more interesting features there. You've got manage, you can collaborate, everything's based on the cloud. You can sign in on different devices, and you will be able to sign in on your phones and tablets soon. So you can add collaborators, you can add viewers, so you can share things where people can only view, or you share your project so that people can actually help and put things in. You might be the designer or the writer, and you've invited somebody to put in the graphics or put in audio. You can set up artificial actors. So we've got over 150 artificial actors' voices, AI voices, and you can tune them a little bit as well. So you set them up and give them the names so that you now can start your story. So we believe that it's a very simple programming system. The idea is no code. We don't want people to think they have to code. We want people to just be creative writers or designers. That's the idea. We're trying to get to the point where it's as simple to make and upload and share interactive games and stories as easy as you could make a YouTube or a podcast. So I'll quickly walk you through a very tiny project here, and it uses these different choice action tiles. So you have your virtual desktop, which you can zoom in and out of and scroll infinitely in any direction, and you, on starting a new project, would have a big start bar in the middle. You would pull down these various things with, you can do it on your finger if it's touchscreen, if you're on your tablet. But let's say we're going to create this little exercise, and I will walk you through it. So it's in a tea room. The player is going to walk into a cafe and be served a hot drink, and yeah, and it's going to be talked about. So we would pull an audio node tile onto the screen. It will ping open and ask you to choose from a library of sound effects, a sound effect to put in, or you can just upload one from your hard drive or find one from one of the many sites that give out free sound effects. We'll go for a little tinkle of a bell, put that down and title it, and then just pull a line across from the start to that tile so that when you press test, it starts there and it will just ring a little bell. Couldn't be easier. So now pulling down a speak node, you put that there. This is a narrator saying you walk into a cafe. Okay, so you set the voice to the narrator and you put in the text. And now when you press test, it tinkles a bell and says you enter a cafe. Moving quickly on, you pull down a visual node and it asks you to put in a picture, and it just goes into our library or upload a picture from your hard drive, and you can find loads and loads of pictures off the internet. Just make sure that they are copyright free, although there are lots of sites which will give them to you very, very cheaply. So Dreams Time is one that I like. You can get thousands of illustrations for sort of less than $1 each, where Shutterstock is quite expensive. And Fiverr allow you to commission authors, artists to make pictures for you quite cheaply. Anyway, we've got all of these on our help pages. The sort of places that if you're the writer and you don't have a friend who's an artist, there's ways around this. Don't worry. Okay, so moving on. So we pulled down a speak node here, and we've linked it up, and this is going to be a question. So we set the voice to Tessa, who's a young English girl, and we put in the text of saying, welcome to my cafe, what would you like to drink? Now, she's posed a question and it's in context. She's in a cafe, so what are you going to ask for? So we'll put down choice nodes. So we pull down the choice and we title it tea, and we put in look for the word tea. Now this is a bit like a Google search in the fact that somebody might say, I'd like a nice hot cup of tea, please. It had said the word tea, so it's going to go through this into this, and she says, I'll go and get you a cup of tea. And then we have a little logic here and says, and we put it down, we create a new variable called drink, and we say drink equals tea. Now, you can pull down another choice of, say, coffee. Title it coffee. and the player may be playing this experience and saying, oh, I'd like a nice latte, please. Now, that's different. That's your Google search wouldn't usually pick that up. It's not even a synonym. It's just a different word for coffee. So as an author, you put in intent words or keywords of all those you'd accept. So whilst it's coffee, inside there when it opens up, you can say, I'll accept macchiato, flat white, and you just put any of the different types of coffee that you can think of so that she can say, I'll just go and get you your coffee, and you can set the variable drink to coffee. And in any sort of, I was going to say in programming term, but there is no programming, you always get if then else. Well, we've got sort of anything, and it will check all cases, and you can have as many as you like in it. You can go big spider's web, you can do like 16, 20 choices if you really like, so long as the words are not confused, they don't sound similar in any way. That's the thing to watch out for. But if they said something but it wasn't picked up, it wasn't one of the choices that you've given, it will go down here. So she's, in this case, it's very simple, and you might have asked for a water or hot chocolate or something, and she says, I'll get you your drink, and it just says drink equals something. She can then, you pull down this, and she can talk about the weather or COVID or something, whatever you talk about in cafes nowadays. But then she, inside the game, can look and see what the variable was. So she looks and says, oh, the drink was tea. And she can come out, she would be coming over and saying, I hope you're enjoying your tea. Or if the drink was set to coffee, I hope you're enjoying your coffee. And here it was something else. We don't know what it was, but in a natural language conversations, she can say, I hope you're enjoying your drink. And then it goes back to the human responding, the player responding. So that's generally how it works, and it just builds out. They do get quite large flowcharts. So what could you do with this? What sort of games can you make? Obviously, I've just talked about interactive stories, and that's the obvious thing, and sort of conversational dramas, as I pitched it. But you know what? We've got an animatic engine in there. You probably say in Sherlock Holmes, where the illustrator had put things onto different layers and set start points and move points so that it sort of came to life a bit. So you could do animated comics, but you're actually directing the story within the comic as well. So you're talking to the characters and getting them to make their choice, make choices that change the direction of things. You could make games, not kind of FIFA, Forza, or Fortnite, those sort of F games. You could make things like escape rooms quite easily, because those are the sort of puzzle things that you could sort of walk someone through and put the visuals on and things. And movies, you could do interactive movies. Some of you have probably heard of things like Bandersnatch. I mean, that is very, very crude. It literally got to the end, and it got to certain points and says, do you want to go left or right? And it's like, it was just so dull. But we're going to get to the point where we're going to be doing live compositing, which is sort of the layers. So at the moment they're 2D layers. They will be 3D layers, and you'll be able to do like they did in Mandalorian, where you're sort of artificial scenes with artificial characters, but you will speak to them. They will break the fourth wall. Characters may talk to you as the main player, and you will talk back, and you may upset them and they may walk off, but that will change the direction of a story. So these are the sort of things we're looking for. And you can imagine that you could take interesting brands. I mean, the obvious thing is we've made video games of lots of, like, for lots of films, and it was always a case of you play the character. You don't. I mean, imagine like a Harry Potter game. You sort of drive Harry Potter around the video game, and you do make choices by sort of what you pick up or what you shoot or flash with your wand or whatever. But now this will be sort of Hermione will be talking to you as you being Harry Potter, and you will be answering in character. So this is going to be like some fun things to do in the future, and we've got quite a roadmap of features. One of the things that's on our roadmap is to uncover the GPS of the phone and the compass direction, so that the authors could make location-based games. So we all saw how Pokemon Go was popular, and geocaching. Geocaching is a bit funny because it sort of like has little metal boxes that are put around the place, and you have to sort of subscribe to the service and things. But we're thinking that, well, you could just have treasure hunts which are based on like you walk around the town, take pictures of statues, and the clues are kind of, well, what's the date of the when the statue was put there, or when the person died or something. But make interesting treasure hunts, that are sort of historical treasure hunts or something. In fact, that goes on to the sort of, it doesn't need to be fiction, it can be non-fiction. So if you are sort of talking to an artificial character, then they can talk back. Then that person could be very, very knowledgeable on the subject and be teaching you something. And you can do museum tours and all sorts. So there's lots of things you could do with these tools, and we are adding more features all the time. So we've been commissioning stories up to now. We're running a competition so that people like yourselves can have a go at creating something that's very different. And we want to see people take things into different directions and learn what is possible, because we have generally picked on stories. We're learning lots of new interesting lessons, but we are doing what was branching narrative and taking it to the next generation. But there's different ways of taking it. We gave the tool set to a YouTuber and sort of asked the YouTuber what he could do with it. We were just interested to not give it to someone who's a writer or an artist or a game designer. They were just a YouTuber, and we want it to be as easy for them to use. And this is what they created, and I think it's quite fun, so I'll show you.
Welcome to Slopes Game Show, the video game quiz show. Let's start off by introducing ourselves. My name's DJ Slope from the YouTube channel Slope's Game Room, where we chat about all of that retro gaming goodness. You know, the good old days of Sega versus Nintendo. What about you guys? Who's your favourite company? Is it Sega or Nintendo?
I've always been a fan of Nintendo.
Oh, Nintendo. No, fair play, fair play. They make some incredible games and incredible consoles. There's absolutely no denying it. My question for you to warm you up will be based on the company's lead character, Mario, who's been around since 1981, July the 9th of 1981 to be exact, in Japan, back when he was an unnamed sprite in a hugely popular arcade game. But what was that arcade game? Now, do you want a clue? Do you know the answer? Or do you want to give up?
I'm not sure, so can I have a clue?
Okay, here's a clue. This was the arcade game that propelled Nintendo into popularity. And although it did feature Mario, back then known as simply Jumpman, eventually, this game was actually named after his ape-like villain. Come on, I'm just giving it to you here, guys.
Oh, of course, it's Donkey Kong.
That's right, it was Donkey Kong. Back when Nintendo was struggling to grab hold of the Western arcade market, their game Radar Scope simply just did not sell as well as expected. Because of this, the company decided to repurpose the machines into something completely new, and in the process ended up creating a couple of the most iconic video game characters of all time: Donkey Kong and, of course, Mario.
I mean, it's really interesting because he just recorded lots of pieces of video and put it together as a quiz. So in some ways it's quite shallow, but in some ways it's quite amazing because you play that for sort of 10 minutes or so and you feel like you're having a conversation with him. But he recorded that back in, I don't know, June or something, so months ago, and you're now having a conversation offline with someone, but it's feeling like it's real. Which is quite incredible. So we were surprised by that, and we think that there's lots of interesting surprises that could be had, and so that's why we're kind of running a competition to just, well, I was going to say to the end of the year, but we won't look at it for a few days until we're all back at work. So there's some prizes on the table for if you want to have a go. But I have to say, One of the things about competitions, myself and my brother got into the games industry by a competition. It was a TV competition of design a game. There's a very embarrassing video on YouTube about it. But the point is, by winning that competition, it spurred us on, and then we went into the games industry and have very successful careers since. But a little motivation doesn't hurt. You might win some money, but even if you don't, you'll have a project to be proud of that you can show as a CV piece. And I know that when I interview people for working for me in a games company, I often ask sort of what, like, wonderful portfolio, wonderful, brilliant, but what project have you done sort of off your own that wasn't part of the curriculum? Now, often that's game jam projects, which is great, and that's great because we sort of end up having a talk about how it was, like developing it over the sort of weekend and stuff. But this is a great one to talk about because it's new, it's novel, it's next generation. It's not some sort of 2D game that you've tried to sort of put together in Unity very hurriedly. But actually, games are very, very quick to create within RichCast. It is actually very, very suitable for a game jam. You will find that you can make story adventures very quickly. And frankly, if you download this, and it's all free off our website, you'll find that you'll be creating your own conversations with artificial characters within an hour or two. It really is quite simple. Anyway, enough of that. I'm going to show you a tiny little project. I'm just going to finish with a tiny little project that I created for a bit of fun. I don't know why it's flickering. Okay, so here's a project, a little bit complicated, no coding, just a lot of nodes and choices being made in dialogue. Let's have a quick look at what it does then. If I test it in the debug window.
Sometimes it helps to talk about what's troubling you. I'm a good listener, and I promise I won't tell anyone what you say to me. Tell me what's been bothering you.
Well, my job today is to give a talk to a university.
Work is hard, that's why we call it work. How long has work been a problem for you?
Not too long, although I've always worked hard.
How do you feel about this?
A little sad, I guess.
Feelings are important, we shouldn't ignore them. I know it sounds trite, but try to think positively. There's good evidence that a positive mindset helps with mental health. What do you think you should do?
Just carry on and be positive.
Is there something else you'd like to talk to me about today?
Have you ever tried the Turing test?
I never said I could pass the Turing test. Really, humans are so pushy with their robots.
Yes. Okay, well,
Anything
thank you
else
very
troubling
much.
you?
No, it's fine, thank you. Got the idea. It looks for sort of keywords and has different responses, and it could be quite fun to just have a conversation straight one-on-one. I did that for a bit of a laugh, partly because I'm a Red Dwarf fan, but it is the kind of thing that you see on sort of sci-fi movies where you are just talking to artificial characters, and now we can do this. But what are they going to say? That's the question. What is their story? What is their motivation? And why do we care? Why does the player want to interact with these characters? So I leave that up to you. And at this point, I would be asking if you have any questions, but unfortunately, because we've done this as a video, I can't do that. You can send questions to our email address, and we will answer them. For people who go and download and register, we've got a Discord channel, and that's very active, and we have a few people in our community team that are answering questions and generally trying to help you make the best experience you possibly can. So lots of tutorials, lots of help. I wish you luck, and I think this is an interesting opening of new opportunities for future entertainment. So there you go. Hopefully you found that really, really interesting. It's an interesting future that we're going into, and it's hopefully an interesting future that you want to be part of. I felt I should just sign off so you kind of knew who the voice was in the distance. But yeah, I hope this is deeply inspiring, and that you will go and have a play and think about what you could create, because I'm sure you'll agree it will be a really fun thing to be involved in. So thank you very much, and good luck, everyone.